church. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We are officially in the holiday season. You can now listen to your Christmas music and put up decorations. It's now appropriate. There's a lot I love about this season, but I'm going to start with something that I don't like about the season. One of the things, which is all the holiday shopping. Reason why is I like saving money. That's the way I operate. I am a saver. I married a spender. My wife, Jill, she loves Christmas shopping, and so she tells me I'm really not fun to go to the mall with during this time of year. When Jill sees sale, she sees discount, she sees opportunity, she sees joy. For her, it's buy, spend, and spend. When I see sale, I think of my professor who told me that sale in Spanish is sale, which means to go, leave. And so when I tell Jill, it's like, look, the signs are saying leave. We got to be polite. I don't like the sale season. I don't like buying. I don't like purchasing. And I think part of this is not just because I'm stingy, although that's part of the problem. I think the other reason is that the holiday season often reminds me about all of the other financial stressors that come with the month of December and the month of January. And think about it. This is the month, or tomorrow will be the month when you're thinking about taxes for the new year. It's when utility bills get higher. It's when you have to start gift shopping. It's when travel expenses become a thing as well. If you are on health insurance, you got to renew your medical premium. It's all of these expenses that just pile up that make financial stress and worry somewhat of an inevitability of the holiday season. So that's one thing that is going to happen this winter, this Christmas, is that anxiety often visits us and all of us in many and various ways. But then there's also a second inevitability, a little more cheerful one. The other inevitable thing is that during this holiday season, you are going to run into the words of the prophet Isaiah. You're going to hear about him in Hallmark Christmas cards. You're going to hear his words in holiday carols. If you know Handel's Messiah, you're going to hear all of Isaiah in there. If you're on Facebook or Instagram or whatever you're using these days, if you're younger, you're going to see AI-generated posts about Isaiah. And the reason why is because Isaiah is one of the prophets that said all those years ago, he predicted that Jesus would come onto the scene one day. This is what Isaiah says, and it's going to sound really familiar to you. He says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace." And it can be really easy during the holiday season to hear that over and over and over again, and it just becomes so normalized that it just becomes a part of the background of the Christmas season. Isaiah's words of who Jesus is and what he's going to be all about can be as Santa Claus, or as Christmas lights, or as Mariah Carey. It's just something that happens in the holiday season. It's just back there in the background of the festivities. But what we wanted to do as a teaching team this time around was kind of slow down and focus in on the words of Isaiah and what he has to say, and especially the names that he has for Jesus, because we do believe that these names aren't just said out loud so that we can feel somewhat festive. I think these names are there because they are a real source of hope for us, no matter where we find ourselves and whatever time we may find ourselves. I think when it comes to the topic of financial anxiety and worry, there's no better place to start than in the passage of Isaiah, and particularly in the first name that he gives Jesus, the Wonderful Counselor. To understand that title, and especially what Isaiah is talking about, we kind of have to do a little bit of history here. Isaiah is speaking in this passage towards the end of the 8th century BC. And towards the end of the 8th century BC in 700 something, there was a king by the name of King Ahaz. He was king over Jerusalem. And Ahaz had a major problem. And his issue was that up to the north of Jerusalem, there were two kings by the name of Rezin and Pekah who were starting a super team. They had this alliance. And they decided what they were going to do was Pekah and Rezin were going to come down to Ahaz's house. They were going to kill Ahaz. They were going to kill his entire family. They were going to install a new king and basically take all the money and rule. Scholars call the alliance between Pekah and Rezin the Syro-Ephraimite coalition, or as I like to call it, the SEC, right? And if you're laughing, you know that the SEC in football terms is known as this big, powerful super conference. Right? And if that makes no sense to you, think about the Kansas City Chiefs or some other behemoth of a team, right? That is the SEC. And Rezin and Pekah look unbeatable. And by comparison, King Ahaz looks like the Pac-2. He looks like Oregon State. He looks like Washington State University. He looks like he doesn't stand a chance. So as the north is coming in and they're about to destroy King Ahaz, he's looking around for help. He's looking around for hope. And then that's the moment where Isaiah comes to Ahaz. And Isaiah says something, I hate when prophets say this. He's like, don't be afraid, as if that's going to solve everything. But he tells him, don't be afraid. And why? Well, because Isaiah tells him, guess what? A child is going to be born. And this child is going to be the promise of God's presence. And this child will be the promise that God is going to deliver you. The thing that you fear will not come to pass, because when this child grows up, he will become a wonderful counselor, or a Pele Yoetz. He will be someone who can devise plans and policies that will benefit the flourishing of all people. So Ahaz, you have nothing to be worried about, because your Pele Yoetz, your wonderful counselor, is on the way. So you might be wondering, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? This is in the 8th century BC. Jesus doesn't come around until year 0. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about something that happens in Isaiah's time, in Ahaz's time, 700 years ago? Or is Isaiah talking about something that's going to happen in the future? If you've ever questioned that about these Christmas passages, the answer is it's both. It's a little bit of both, and let me try to explain this with some measuring cups, right? Think of biblical prophecy like this. You have Isaiah saying, hey, there's going to be a wonderful counselor, King Ahaz, don't worry. And in fact, there was a wonderful counselor that came along. His name was King Hezekiah. And he grew up to be one of the best kings in Israel, and he did a lot of good things. Now, I want you to imagine King Hezekiah is sort of the measuring cup here. He's a smaller measuring cup in the measuring cups. So Isaiah was correct. Ahaz, you have nothing to worry about. Hezekiah is coming. Hezekiah will be here. But Isaiah's not just talking about Hezekiah, the wonderful counselor. Isaiah is also talking about big picture. There is a king that's going to come 700 years later. There's a bigger measuring cup. And he will be a wonderful counselor. And he will devise plans and policies that will ensure the flourishing of all people. And in fact, we celebrate that king every December in Christmas because we know that king to be Jesus. But then, guess what? We also celebrate in the Advent season another bigger measuring cup because we believe that Jesus will return to make all things new again. And so Isaiah's prophecy is not just something that happened in the past, it's something that's also we're looking forward to in the future. It is one stack made up of multiple bowls or cups. And that's Isaiah's prophecy. It is one word from God fulfilled in a process that unfolds over time. That's the message that Isaiah has for Ahaz. He's like, look, the mini cup is coming, but the bigger cups are coming soon. You have nothing to fear. Of course, Ahaz, if you know the story between him and Isaiah, doesn't really like what Isaiah has to say to him. Because as Ahaz looks at his situation, he realizes, wait a minute, no, I need more soldiers. I need more finances. I need more weapons. And what he got instead was what? The presence of God in a child and the promise of what God will do. And for Ahaz, this was not enough. The assurance of God's presence and promise was not enough. And so Ahaz devised his own scheme, and there's not enough time to get into that story, but the short end of that version is it does not end well. It does not go good. Ahaz's his ending is pretty terrible, actually. And so that's where Ahaz's story ends. He just says, thank you, God, for your presence. Thank you, God, for your promise. But no thank you. I have my own things I want to do. I have my own means of going about my life. Fast forward 700 years later. We're once again talking about new kingdoms and new kings. We're talking about the Empire of Rome. We have a new king by the name of Augustus. And he believes himself to be the Son of God and a wonderful counselor. And he decides, in my wonderful counseling, in all my wisdom, in all my divineness, I'm going to pass a new policy that's going to benefit everyone. And we read about it in the Gospel of Luke. Christmas story starts like this. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. If you've read the Christmas story in Luke before, oftentimes we'll read that passage right there and we'll think to ourselves, oh, there was a census happening. Okay, this is just setting the background. This is just letting us know what year this took place, what year Joseph and Mary and Jesus and all that happened. But I want us to kind of pause on that detail right there because it's actually very, very relevant to our understanding and interpretation of the Christmas story. A Roman census was a really important event. It had two purposes. Number one, it was to count how many people were living in the empire for military recruitment. And number two is to figure out what access people had to tax them. And you don't have to be a biblical scholar to know if this policy was popular or not. Was it popular? Absolutely not. It was horrendous. No one liked this policy. And in fact, if you read some of the historians of the times of the first century, Josephus in particular, these censuses were so unpopular, it led to violent uprising, especially in Galilee. And I'm not going to go into too much of it, but if you want to hear all about what Judas the Galilean did and how he started this revolution, go ahead and check out the sermon right here. You can go ahead and take a picture. See what if Jesus was serious about anxiety is something that was preached back in 2024. Look up the minute marker 16 to 1833. You can learn more about Judas the Galilean. But for our purposes, what you need to know is that these policies made people very unhappy. And part of all the hoopla, part of the reasons why people were really upset with this was because Augustus' tax burden came out to around 40% what a Jewish family earned. And that percentage was not adjusted based on income. So if you make medium wage today, you owe Augustus Caesar about $16,000 this December. That's the tax burden that people were facing due to the census that he started in the Gospel of Luke. And oh, by the way, because they were an agrarian community, most people were farmers, right? So everything depended on a good crop for the year. And if there was not a good crop that year, guess what? Not only are you getting taxed out of your mind, but you may lose everything you have, including possibly your very freedom, because you might sell yourself as a slave. And so things were not going well in the time of this story. And so when you think of Mary and Joseph heading off to Bethlehem and there's a star and a cute donkey, they're not heading home for the holidays. They are heading home to get taxed. They are heading home to face some financial burdens on top of all of the normal issues most couples face, such as having a newborn child and starting a new marriage. And, well, this part's not normal, but trying to make everyone understand how it's a virgin birth and two angels visited them and all that. But besides that, all of those pressures, and they were expecting to pay a lot of money and to lose a lot in this season. And it was during this, however, that they run across a family that welcomes them in. And we're going to read about this right now. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. We're all familiar with this scene right here, but I'm going to ruin your Hallmarkian vision of the scene just for a little bit. When we think of the story, oftentimes the way we think of it is that Joseph and Mary went to every single Holiday Inn in Bethlehem, and everyone told them, "Hey, sorry, we have no room, get out. And you can take that cave or you can take that stable and you can live in there, but we got no space for you." And that reading works really well in dramatic plays. And I like that reading, but I also think it's sort of anachronistic, which is a word that means it's a way of bringing our modern assumptions into the biblical text and doesn't really fit the reality of the times in the first century. Because most first century homes operated this way. They had 2 floors. People slept upstairs, and then downstairs there was a living room area where families would hang out and they would have their meals. And attached to that living area was a space where families kept their animals at night. And if that's really hard to visualize, I have a visual for you. All right, so you'll notice in this house, which is something that would have been dated to back then, you see on the upper floor all of the sort of guest rooms or living rooms that people would stay in. And then notice on the first floor, what do you have? You got a living space there, but right next to it, you also have the animals and a manger and all of that as well, right? The reason why I'm pointing this out is that we often think of it as, well, Mary and Joseph were received and they were thrown and cast away to some room somewhere out there and they were cold and alone and it was horrible. But what I wanted to show you is that whoever owned this home didn't put Joseph and Mary into some second-rate barn. More likely what happened was that they said, well, the upstairs space, as you can see it's very small, was very full. And so they said, well, the only space we might have left is downstairs. So it's likely, if this is the house that they were in, what happened was they made room for them with the little they had left. Now, was this Joseph's family that did this? I don't know. Were these strangers? I don't know. The text doesn't say. All the text says was the upper rooms were filled, so they decided to give the lower rooms. And I want you to pause for a moment and to think about just how crazy that is, how radical it is for a family to do that, whether they were related to Joseph or didn't know Joseph, because they were also under the Roman Empire. They also had to deal with the census. They also had to collect all their assets and give away 40%. And then all of a sudden, while they are in their own form of financial distress, this young couple comes knocking at their door, and they don't just ask for a room, but under Jewish hospitality and the expectations that people had in their culture, what Mary and Joseph was really asking was not just, can we have a spare room? But they were also asking, if we are hungry, will you have food to share with us? And if we are thirsty, will you have water to give to us? And if we have nothing to wear, will you keep us warm? And if we are delivering this child in this home, will you help us? And we've never been parents before, so will you give of yourselves in a way to help us raise this child as well? And if I was that couple, I probably would have been like, are you out of your mind? I would have said, there is a census going on. The economy is horrible. The government hasn't figured it out. We're losing 40% of our crops. Our house is full. No, we don't have space for a baby. We need to save money, not spend more money. Saleh, go. There is no cell here. Go. But that's not what they do, right? They don't say go. They don't say leave. They don't say we have nothing for you. Instead, they decide to open their doors to this young couple. They decide not to hoard and hold on to what they have, but to let it go and to give compassionately and with radical hospitality. They welcome them in, and in doing so, they welcome in the very presence of God. And that's really beautiful, and that's wonderful, and that's heartwarming. But here's the part of the story that really challenges me and irks me, is that they take this radical leap of obedience to welcome in this strange couple with a baby, and they do all these things, even at great risk to themselves. And how does God reward this family in Bethlehem? Does the text say God gave them tenfold in crops that year? Does the text say that God got rid of the census for good? Does the text say that Caesar Augustus fell off his horse and died and everyone celebrated? It doesn't say any of that. Right? All it says is that this couple entered into their home and had a child. In other words, God did not deliver a single thing that this family in Bethlehem might have hoped for. But what they got instead was the presence of God in this child and the promise of what he will do. And if I can be honest with you, for me, that doesn't feel like enough all the time. It really doesn't feel like enough all the time. Because I'm hearing that and I'm thinking, wait a minute, all of these things are happening, God? All of these expenses and all of these worries and all of these fears, and your promise to me is your presence and your promise. I don't feel like that is enough. And the temptation for me is not to act like that couple in Bethlehem, but to act a lot like King Ahaz and say, that's not what I need, God. Send me something else, or I will devise my own ways of fulfilling what I need in this time. And as we think about our own time as well, you may be tempted to feel this way, right? As we mentioned earlier today, there are financial worries in this room. There are financial struggles and anxieties in this room. But I would also be remiss not to mention that this year in particular, it's not just because of holiday expenses and end-of-year expenses. And listen to me carefully, because I don't want to be misquoted on this. And it's on camera, so we can replay it, right? But in this time as well, I think we can also say we have many leaders who would consider themselves wonderful counselors, who devise plans and enact policies to ensure the flourishing of all people. But you'll notice, actually, maybe the governance hasn't exactly led to what we've hoped for, because over the last 2 months, what have we seen? We have seen delays in SNAP benefits. We have seen massive layoffs. We have seen paychecks being withheld. We have seen people's health care premiums increase. And now you might be thinking, oh my goodness, is he talking about politics? Is he getting partisan? And what I want to say real quickly is that no, I do not believe the church should ever be partisan in the way that we will never tell you who to vote for or what policies to vote for, not because it's not illegal. It's actually legal now, but we will never do it, right? Because theologically speaking, what we deeply believe is that God doesn't fit into a party. There's a pastor by the name of Scott Daniels who once said, hey, when it comes to being a follower of Jesus, there are some things that are good and beautiful in the world that God calls us to conserve. And then there are some things in the world that God calls us to liberate. And if you're going to be conserving some things and you're going to be liberating some things, guess what? You're not going to fit into either party when you're following the ways of Jesus. So in that sense, no, we will never be partisan. But I will say this, there is nothing partisan in naming the ways that people suffer. There's nothing partisan in naming the real ways that people are burdened. And if the gospel can't be good news to people who are feeling real burdens outside of all these walls, and perhaps inside of these walls as well, it's not good news at all. These aren't just headlines we read. These are real people that we face day in and day out, even within this church. And you may have experienced all of this firsthand. You may know people that are experiencing this firsthand. And when you take all of that and add it to the normal everyday chaos, it can be really easy to look at this story in this Christmas tale and to see God say, I have a promise and I have my presence, and to say that is not enough. It's really easy to tell Jesus, are you going to give me $1 million? Because if you're not, it's not enough. Jesus, are you going to lower my healthcare premiums? Because if you're not going to do that, it's not enough. Jesus, are you going to turn over some tables in Congress and get my party in power again, or keep my party in power as it is? Then it's not enough. And we will keep saying it's not enough, it's not enough. But here's the thing, here's the reality, is that often what we will find is that God will not fulfill our hopes the way we want him to. And that could be bad news for us, and we can feel like God isn't good because of that. But here's what I want to say. The difficult truth of the matter is that Jesus never promises a life without trouble, or that he will deliver in ways that make sense to us or fulfill our hopes. But the wonderful truth, the one we must learn to believe in, is that his presence is with us. He is God with us. He is Immanuel, and his promises are true, that he will make all things new, and somehow that is enough. The promise of Isaiah is that one day the real wonderful counselor will return, and when he does, everything that is evil and broken and sinful in the world will be overturned and made right again. And those who are in the thrones of power will be cast down, and those who are low will be lifted up, and the world will know scarcity no more, because as the scriptures say, it will be so filled with the glory of God as the waters cover the sea, that all shall know abundance. And we shall beat our swords into plowshares, and the lion shall lay down with the lamb, and all things will be made new again. And that future is coming, and every Christmas we say, we believe it's happening, it's coming, it's going to be good again. It's going to be new again. But the challenge for us is this. It's the same challenge that Ahaz had. It's the same challenge that Mary and Joseph had. It's the same challenge that the family in Bethlehem had. Our challenge is, when scarcity comes knocking at our door, when the threat of everything we hold dear is before us, will we trust that the presence of God and the promise of God in Jesus Christ is more than enough for us, not just in this Advent season, but in the years to come? And I think answering that question is important, whether we are people who feel like we have plenty, or whether we are people who feel like we do not have enough. And in fact, for our next steps, I have 3 questions for each category of people. And the questions go something along the lines of this. If you feel like you lack, if your experience is trouble and struggle, here are the questions. Number 1, do we believe in the Christmas story that God is with us in Jesus and promises to do something new through him? That first question is really important. It's going to take you a long time. But if the answer is yes, then secondly, will we refuse to seek comfort and hope in anything else and find it first in the Son of God, who is coming back and will not forget us in his wise governance, in his wonderful counseling? And then finally, trusting in this promise, will we boldly live lives shaped by hope? And just like that family in Bethlehem, will we choose to love our neighbors when it is inconvenient to do so? Now, for those of us who may not be wondering, what do we do until the next paycheck? But our questions are, what shall we save and how shall we live for the future? I think these are the 3 questions for us this Advent season. Is number 1, again, same question. Do we believe in the Christmas story? Do we believe that God is with us in Jesus and promises to do something new through him? And if yes, will we see what we have not as something to cling or to hoard, but as something God has entrusted to us to use for the sake of others? And then number 3, instead of waiting for the world to get better, will we open our hands, our homes, our time, and our resources so that we might welcome our neighbors into a small taste of God's kingdom here and now. Will you pray with me? Jesus, I thank you for the promise through Isaiah that you are coming soon and you will be a wonderful counselor who will set to rights all of the ways our world is broken. And we just named some of the ways. I mean, those are just some. There are many ways in which the financial burdens and anxieties creep up on us in this holiday season. And God, I ask, whether it's with finances or anything else in life, will we be people who seek hope in the right places? And will we be reminded by the story of Ahaz and the story of your coming that oftentimes, though you do not operate in the ways that we hoped or wished or in ways that make sense to us, you operate in a way that gives us yourself. You give us your presence and you give us your promise. And God, I ask that this morning you would help us to realize that is more than enough. That is the light that enters into the darkness that the darkness cannot overcome. So Jesus, help us to see you clearly in this Advent season, that we may put our trust and hope in you. We pray this all in your name, and all God's people said, amen.